Before we begin, maybe I can do a little bit of a housekeeping arrangement here. I think the standing place only near the doors, but there are quite a few seats here. So I want to let people know it's perfectly okay for people to move to this side of the room if you're looking for space. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have Gibran. Thank you for joining us at today's conference. I have to say the excitement is palpable when people found out that I was going to get an opportunity to talk to you. When the collaterals go out, I got WhatsApp messages to say that, oh no, oh wow, you get to speak to Gibran. And also over the past 2 days in Jakarta, I was here since Monday. Many people have good questions for you. So the pressure is on me to make this a good session. And of course, the pressure is also on you because there's so much focus and attention on you. Maybe I'll give you a few minutes. Actually, just top 3 points on what's going through your mind now at this juncture for eFishery.
Yeah, I think it's our 11th year in eFishery right now. We were just celebrating our 11th year anniversary in 8th of October. And I think on that 11th year, the main thing that what surprised me is that how much it has changed since the beginning of the inception of the company. Because when we started, being big and being unicorn was not part of the menu, right? It was not part of my dream. It's beyond my wildest dream because I never thought that it could actually be big. I was a fish farmer that wanted to build a solution and sell it to my fish farmer fellows, and suddenly it got big. And when you get to a certain size, the expectation is also changing from a different view. And then I personally have to relearn as a CEO. I think the first part is that at some point when you aspire to be big and there's an opportunity for you to be even the biggest and the largest and the biggest in the world. I also was enticed by that idea. I want to be the largest in the world. And I already know eFishery is the largest aquaculture technology company in the world right now. But I think the curse of aspiring to be big comes with many temptation, but comes with the problems as well. Because as you go big, when suddenly it gets you out of your track on what you want to be. Because that's reminded me that when I started eFishery, I never wanted eFishery to be big. I want eFishery to be impactful. But when you big, then you care about the size without care about the size of the impact. You care about the size of the business, the size of the revenue, then how you build a strong, profitable business without caring about how then it actually solving the problems that you want to solve. So I think that's quite of interesting exercise that we did internally to get us on the backtrack that we want to focus on the impact for that.
Yeah. And I mean, talking about being big, one of the things that people really pay attention to is your expansion into India. I mean, if you look at the aquaculture market in Indonesia, people size it at a 9.4 billion size, but in India, it's a 15 billion size. So, I can really understand and empathize with maybe the tension being big, but also being distracted from it. What are your learnings from India?
I think one of the most interesting part about India when we started to do an expansion, I think there was a time where a high growth companies expected to definitely be a regional play. And many of the unicorns and decacorns, as you see on the list, are trying to create a footprint out of Southeast Asia. It was initially also the back part of our head when we tried to be, okay, let's play regional, we want to be big, and then figuring out what's the market that makes sense for us, simply because on the appetite of being a regional, and also in some part of it, to create a story of the future fundraising, to assure the future fundraising, IPOs and whatnot, and to be that we're not an Indonesian company, but we're a regional company, with a regional play and the global conquer that we're trying to do. I think that's one part of it. But once we did a pilot in India, what excites me is about how the market is definitely bigger in the size, but mostly it's related to shrimp, but not on the fish side. But on the fish side, the typical Indian farmers actually produce 15 times less than typical Indonesian farmers, which means that simply by bringing a basic farming practice, we can increase their income by 5 times. And that's amazing. When we did a pilot, many farmers love e-fishery. Many farmers think that we've been what they've been waiting for, and they're so grateful how e-fishery is. I think replicating the business model is one thing, but my target, we already commercial in India for 1 year. My target to the team that, hey, you have to be a bit of positive on the first year. You have to be profitable in the first year, because I think like replicate the business model is easy, right? You have a business, you have a customers, then figuring out. But replicating the profitability, that's a challenging. And how then path to regional expansion is to assure that you're not falling on a pitfall on simply being in other country without actually having a strong footprint on the actual business and profitability. So that's my target. And we kind of achieve it. On the first year, we were already profitable. But most importantly, beyond that, is to assure that we can replicate our impact. So the impact that we're seeing in Indonesia, that the farmers are thankful that we're here, can we actually replicate in other countries that has entirely different culture, entirely different landscape? And we are thankful enough, right, at least on the scale that we're in India, which is still small, we can replicate that model.
I mean, if you're telling me 15x for fish farmers, then I think your impact there is obvious. And the follow-on question would be, if we turned profitable in a year, what are your learnings from India? Is it, let's roll our sleeves up and really nail that market? Or is that going to give you confidence that, okay, after India, in my pipeline or roadmap, it will be 2 more in Asia and then going to LATAM? What's your hit space after the one year of the Indian experience?
Yeah, I think again, part of the experience of India also to remind me that it's all about impact to farmers. It's all about farmers' productivity. And that's the reason why at the beginning we could be successful, even that we didn't raise that much of funding, because we show that our impact on productivity with the IoT solutions that we provided, and once we had an end-to-end solutions, is actually impacting farmers. If we can replicate and focus on how then improve farmers' productivity, and they can be thankful, and that's the key. It's not just about building the business revenue top line. Suddenly, I mean, it's what you care about the CEO, because it's what is driven, right, by the shareholders and stakeholders. But I think underneath the growth of the revenue and the top line is actually the impact that you're making for the customers, and whether customers are willing to use your product, willing to stay, and willing to pay for the long run. And that's what we want. I think I try to emulate that model in India while also seeing what other market is there. And I think it's maybe, I mean, compared to 3-5 years ago when everyone is focusing on growth, I think we tend to be more cautious. I mean, if you ask me probably 5 years ago, I would tell that we're going to be in 10 countries in 5 years. But right now, I think we just want to focus on deepening our impact. If it's just in the 2 countries, then it's better than enough.
I hear you. So shifting gears a little bit, I think part of the analysis into e-fishery is, how would you describe yourself as a tech company? Because you have an e-feeder, which is an auto-feeding technology and innovation. You have the feed marketplace, you have the B2B platform. We were just schooled by Nick on a lot of the investment fundamentals. If I map that onto an income statement or looking at the P&L, how should I recognize the revenue streams and map that with the technology?
Yeah, I mean that's quite a tricky answer, because when I answer it just by showing what's our revenue mix, it would be looking like our value chain services, which in this case selling the feed and the fish and the offtake and the stream is our majority of revenue. It's more than 90% of our revenue right now. But it's not just about, okay, you're selling feed and you're selling fish, then you're fish and the feed distributors in the case. But no, not exactly that way, because the way that we're selling the feed and the fish is very tech enabled, because we're capturing the data in the pond for us to be able to do many things. For example, let just put an example. We have a feeder. Feeder is as in by of itself, we're selling a technology. So it's a tech product with a subscription model that everyone will see it and a high gross margin. Everyone will see it. It's a tech business, SaaS-like business with an IoT solution. So it's a tech, because it's a product itself is a tech. But because the feeder unlock us to have a data, the pond data, how many feed that we're using, how many fish are there, how many fish that will be harvested, that is unlocked by the IoT solutions itself. then it enables us to open that marketplace. When we're selling the feed to the farmers, it's not just selling the feed in the model of like a traditional feed distributor, but we're actually aggregating how many feed that they need and then finding the right source, including to the buyers, without holding that much of inventory. So compared to the distributor, because we're tech enabled, our inventory level and inventory days is much lower. Then in by of itself, it provides us an edge on the more efficient operational cost.
So it's intertwined.
Intertwined. And the same with the financing. When we talk about the financing, okay, the typical middlemen provide financing on their own balance sheet to the farmers. When the farmers can buy the feed and pay it after harvest. And we call it yarnen, right? Bayar panen, which is quite common. It's a common, and since as long as what I can remember, I also got it from middlemen when I was a farmer. But the difference is that because we can capture the data, we can create credit scoring. And then we had a product that we called Kabayan, right? Kasih Bayar Nanti, that worked with the third-party financing, peer-to-peer lendings to the banks, using our platform that for us to be able to provide the loan, formal financing, lower costs, without using our own balance sheet. So I think that's the edge on being a tech-enabled services, by not just saying, okay, this is what your revenue mix, and then if Fishery is a non-tech company, you're a distribution company. Possibly, we're a supply chain distribution company, but we're definitely a tech-enabled that create us an edge between a pure tech play and a pure distribution play.
So if we look at this room with all the startups, right, I think we see a lot of peer companies in the sense that, hey, you know, there's a transportation company that is enabled by tech, then we see another one competing, or the same with e-commerce, for example. But e-fishery seems very unique. Do you think what you just described represents the barrier of entry for others to come into your space?
Yeah, I think so. I think what interests me on the discussion, especially for to investors that don't really know about the sector, is that they thought that our advantage, our mode, is coming from the tech. Hey, well, you're an IoT solution. Is that the tech and the data is actually your mode? Not exactly. I mean, any good engineers can reverse engineer our tech and build the same tech. But our way on embedding this tech and offering the solutions to farmers in the rural area, and then on top of the platform that you create an end-to-end supply chain that you're aggregating, the whole logistic players, the whole buyers, you know, the stakeholders on the platform, and scaling it in a nationwide when we're working with hundreds of thousands of farmers. That's the challenge, and that's what create mode. Because compared to any traditional players that come to the farmers and say, hey, I can buy your fish, but why can you buy my fish in the higher price, for example, or buy all of my fish easily? Probably not. They can only buy one pond or in the price that is normal in the farm gate price. But because we're tech enabled, it enables us to be able to touch more downstream players and create value to the farmers without us building the supply chain ourselves, because we're embedding our tech solutions and holding the farmers and create that touch point differently, that quite still light asset that compared to any other players. But I think most importantly, that the way that we shape and many of the peers in Indonesia is that when you create like an e-commerce or peer-to-peer lending, the platform itself is a product, right? But we were selling a fish, and you can't really make a fish digital. I mean, it's an actual fish. It's actual alive fish that you have to provide. So there's many things that you have without any infrastructure and touch point for the farmers. I remember vividly 11 years ago when I spoke to the farmers, no farmers own a smartphone. So we had to lend them a smartphone, and then we create this small workshop to educate them. We call it Smartphone 101. So we installed the Facebook, we installed YouTube. We had the spreadsheet that consists of their accounts and the password. So every time they forgot the password, they didn't click forgot password. They call me, hey, what's my password, Mas? So forget about the data safety, data security, and everything. Even then, we hold the password because we created the account ourselves. But a year after, then I went to the same farmers, and suddenly they're doing YouTube. They're watching all of the dangdut songs in the YouTube, which I think quite an improvement, right?
So e-fishery, beyond sustainability and helping fish farmers, is also bringing digital adoption.
Exactly, bringing digital.
So next billion users will be coming from you.
Hopefully, hopefully. But I think that's to our point, is that sometimes we're underestimating how different it is when we talk about the tech adoption. with the landscape that we do have right now. Because when we talk 270 million farmers, people in Indonesia, most people there is quite a tech savvy, mostly in the big cities. That then, if you coming from a tech, use our app, then why do I need to use your app to buy whatever it is? Well, I can buy in the warung beside me. I don't have any bank. I don't need to change it. So that part of the behavior, what needs to be changes. It takes time to simply just bringing a tech. Then you
Yeah.
need to bring other hook to assure that, hey, we can provide you financing, okay, suddenly, but you have to use our tech.
So-
And then you have that multiple
Yeah.
hooks on that.
So just speaking for the investors in the room, right? This creates a lot of challenges because when it comes to the fundraising narrative, especially if you have to bring this to my IC or my investment committee, if you're a tech company and you're in the device or software space, then these are my comparables. If you are in the fishing space, then these are my comparables. If it's ecosystem and distribution channel, then it will be different comparables. But you're kind of mixing everything up, and we're talking about how hard it is to explain e-fishery when you go on your fundraising narratives. How would you describe it in a very succinct way?
Well, I'm still trying to learn it. I think I can't say that I'm quite successful on that. But I think it has changed and then definitely refined throughout time. At the very beginning, it's really hard to even convince investors that what we're trying to do is actually impactful. And there's a business because everyone was only cared about the consumer tech, the typical marketplace or social media and everything. When you brought up an idea, I want to create a cloud-based IoT solution that's selling to the farmers in the rural area, it's not exactly a compelling business pitch for any investors because there's too many friction. You're doing a hardware, you have to set up an IoT solution, manufacturing and part, and then you have to introduce it to farmers in the rural area. And there's many other friction to hinder the growth. And most of the investors are looking for the growth. When if you invest in the consumer tech companies, then the growth will be there. I mean, you just pay in ads, and then the growth is coming throughout the users, the GMP and whatnot. But I think it gets easier once you show throughout time that the business is actually there. Suddenly, what was seen to be risky now is seen as a moat, as a defensibility. Because when you talk about people in the rural area right now, we do have scale, and we talk about the niche, and you don't have any competitors. You care about assuring that the retention is high. Then it brings you a profitability right now. So many of our decisions at the very beginning simply because we are so used to getting said no by investors. The initial decision is focusing on the long term and assuring that we have to make money.
Build a
The
solid
customers
business,
are
right?
are willing to pay for us. But right now, then the pitch would be easier, right? Currently, then because we can say that we're the only players in the market that holding, and we're quite dominant players, and we've been growing, 2 to 3 times, and we've been profitable. So it's easier to translate it, and you can't really put it as in the bucket and whatnot. But if you show them the money, then the money speaks for themselves.
And this is great practice, right? When you go through so many fundraising and so much fundraising and pitches, it's actually good practice for when you have to write your prospectus before you go public. And I know a lot of people are interested in that. Given the current market, what is in your hit space about a potential IPO?
Yeah, and I think well, first of all, IPO is quite up. We can say that it's a probable, a very. We can say it's plain A, right? It's almost necessary for us to get an IPO because we know that as a CEO, I want to give an exit for the shareholders. But in the other way around, that I want the IPO, especially learning on the IPO that has been happening over the past few years, especially in Indonesia right now. I want to create a good story for tech IPOs, especially coming from Indonesian companies, because to be honest, there aren't many. There aren't many IPOs in Indonesia, and the IPOs that are actually was done were that stars and sprinkles, right? So I want to assure that first, after the IPO, it's not the exit for the founders, it's not the exit for the investors, because I definitely can imagine myself continue doing what I'm doing right now over the next 10 to 20 years and continue to create an impact. And if we talk about the $10 billion market in Indonesia and 3 million farmers right now, we only have 100,000 farmers. We're barely scratching the surface right now. That showing an upside of growth, including when we talk about the India global expansion export market that we're doing. So I think it's just about whether we see it inward looking for the most part, whether we're ready on being a public company, because I spoke to founders of the public company, it really changed your life. So I want to assure that we're ready on our processes, assurance, compliance, the governance to get to the IPO, and including our financial position. To your point, we're imagining it as a reverse prospectus. Okay, we're doing IPO for the next couple of years, and then what's the ideal prospectus would look like?
Yeah.
And then whether we do have that, and what's the gap between that prospectus, and we're trying to fill in on the gap. So it's more like an inward looking, while also assuring if we're ready. Then it's also about the market timing, right? So I think the first part of the journey towards the IPO to assure that the company is ready, we have a strong financials, we have a strong processes and governance. And then the other part of the journey, then simply just wait and see when the market is ready. It shouldn't be the other way around. When we think, oh, the market is ready because it's post-election and then the valuation is suddenly bouncing back, let's push the IPO even that the company is not equipped enough to be a public company.
So prior to this session, we were looking at the 2021 batch of Indonesian graduates or IPOs. What is one learning you're taking from that batch after observing them post-IPO?
Yeah. No, I think in general, it's not just in particular what's the batch of the IPO in 2021 itself, but we see then how like the market were too optimistic and create a business expectation that is not realistic, because the business has to keep up with the growth expectation that coming from the valuation, that also coming from the decisions of absorbing too much of the capital. So the business decisions when we created a business model and also business strategy that required a lot of capital, including the landscape itself, that the competition burned money. Then that burnt money pressure many of the companies to raise more capital. That for you to raise that capital, then you need to build unrealistic expectation. And suddenly, when you're becoming on true exit, that it doesn't really give anything left. Not because the business model isn't there, but one part of it is on the readiness. But the other part of it, because it's too overvalued, with any business trajectory is too unrealistic for them to grow. That's why many of it are losing the valuation on what was there, not because the public couldn't appreciate the innovation that it can create, but simply the business trajectory isn't as, can't really justify the valuation that was there in the market. And I think the second is also important, and many of it is more like a structure-wise, right? Many of us talk overhang when we see the IPO as a way for the existing shareholders, including in a few cases some of the founders, to exit. Then you left nothing to the public investors. I don't think that's the fair way to do the business. And I was reminded by one of the legend of entrepreneurship in Indonesia. He had an opportunity to take one of these company public in a really good valuation. But interestingly, he asked the underwriter to reduce the valuation. Hey, this is too overvalued. Why? The market is valued you that way. No, it's too overvalued. I want to assure that if I'm public, then the public investors that are coming with me in the IPO will also make money. So I think that mentality wasn't really there. So we also want to assure internally and has an aligned approach with the shareholders that, hey, we make money as a founder, we make money as a shareholders, but we also have to assure
Future
investors also make money from that. So that both valuation expectation, the growth business model, as part of that readiness, needs to be aligned between when the IPO window comes.
I mean, like for all of us who participate in the public markets, I think that's very reassuring and what we want to hear as well, right? And for eFishery, we have been seeing the company exercise discipline. Recently, there were layoffs. I just want to turn a moment to look internal to the company. When you have layoffs, how would you describe the impact in terms of culture within the company and also your personal leadership journey, as founder and having to do this? What learnings there are?
Yeah, no, what I realize is that generally entrepreneurs love hiring. not because we simply love on growing the company, but it's an immediate impact that you can see. Building the product and services, it will take you some times, right, for this to materialize. But when you hire people, then you open an access of livelihood for those, for him, her, and his or her family. So I think that's what excites us. And the other thing is that the founders tend to have a bias for growth and optimism, because that's why they're being founders. So when any growth show suddenly happens, say let's push some growth on that.
Seize the opportunity.
Exactly, this is the opportunity. That's why when you see what happens during COVID, with all of digitalization is happening, let's do it. Let's hire some more. So I think that's just the nature of it, right? That's the nature of it, that we always have that affinity of building the company, and part of that affinity is hiring. But there's two. But I think eventually, the founder need to make the right decisions for the company over the long run, because we want this to be more long lasting. So whatever reasons that many founders doing the same thing, it could be on the survival mode because they couldn't raise money, they need to survive, they need to reduce the cost and to ensure that they extending the runway. They had to do it. But in our case is also about the shifting of the strategy that kind of expected in a way. So for example, the analogy would be a bank, right? A bank, when they have a strategy on building a digital bank, so they create an investments on creating that digitalization of the bank, then you know that the shifting of the digital bank makes the branches, the offline branches, are now irrelevant, because then it's all digital. I want to move to digital bank.
Sure.
I think same with the e-fishery. The strategy for us, when we invested a lot on that feet in the market, boots on the ground, to ensure that we are educating the farmers. We're building the business, because it was mostly offline, but at the same time we're educating them on the digitalization. Then on the digitized, we had to create and showing the efficiencies and operating leverage to ensure that the long-lasting impact that e-fishery can be there over the next 20 to 50 years, it needs to be there. So that's the reason why we're doing it. Doing the layoff because of that changes of the strategy. But my own learning is that it was definitely not easy. But I learned from many of the practices that is not ideal in the market, because many of the practices, because they had to do it urgently, then they do it in 5 minutes of town hall, and then it's all done, and it's so unfair. That's why when we did it to my team, I remind my team, okay, well, let's just talk about the compliance, the legal and stuff, but focus on the human side of it, because what's impacted is our e-fishery, and this has been supporting
Emotional
us.
connection.
Exactly, the emotional connection. So as much as possible, we have to assure that we do it fairly, because the fair part of it is the value that we want to take care of. But also many of those is outside of your control, especially in the narrative when what's happening outside, and then you can just
It's
take it
it's
as it
never
is.
easy, and I'm sure there might be other entrepreneurs in the audience who's thinking through this as well. So I mean, like, sharing your learning and personal journey, I think will be very impactful to the audience. Maybe just one last question before I turn things to the audience. I think, Indonesia, we have new leadership coming on, and one of the programs coming up is Makan Siang Gratis movement. How do you think corporates or the startups or e-fishery can contribute, or how are you thinking about the program?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't want to focus on how then whether the program is good and enough, because it's not my part of it. But I think this is the flagship program of the new cabinet of Pak Prabowo, right? And that flagship program required lots of capital and budget, absorb many of the nation budget to ensure that it runs smoothly. But it's a nationwide. We're giving out the free lunch of 60 million students. And it's a big task for anyone in the industry to ensure that 60 million logistically all across the nation will be there. And one of the initial idea for the government is to provide a good quality of protein to imported milk as one of the main source of protein. But I don't think that's feasible and viable and the best use of the budget itself if we do a milk import. So we did a research to show that fish is actually uh, a better source of protein if we compare it to the price per gram protein per rupiah that we're spending it. And the challenge to distribute it in 60 million all across the nation is logistical nightmare. But for fishery, it's naturally inherently distributed because we have all fish and shrimp farmers, and including the fishery, wild capture fishery all across the nation, from the Aceh to Papua. So if we can connect, then it's also solves first the price of the raw material itself that reduced compared to the imported milk, and the second, the logistic. And we're talking about $1 per portion, right? So it's not that much anyway. So we have to assure. Then we calculate maybe 20% of it we can reduce compared to the milk, the 13 to 15% of the cost compared to if we do it in imported milk. So I think the idea, and also if we do it and connect it to the whole ecosystem, not just about the fishery, but how the whole ecosystem of the fishermen and fishery farmers, then the trickle down effect on actual rural economy would be amazing.
Yeah.
And it should be also on other type of protein
Local
as well. That can be.
economy, carbon footprints,
footprints.
amongst many other things, right?
True.
I've been hogging you to myself. Maybe I can open things up to the floor. Any questions from the floor? If you can introduce yourself and also a little bit about your business. Anyone? If not, I'm happy to come up with more questions. Okay, I'm going to give the audience a little bit more time to think about it. But we mentioned carbon footprint a little bit, and with Business Times, one of our flagship events is the Sustainability Impact Awards. How do you think your business, or as we think about agri-tech, how do you think we should be resourcing this sector from a sustainability point of view?
Yeah, we just launched our sustainability report. This is our first sustainability report and our third impact report that we just launched, and it will be available on the public. And this is the first year that we're trying to track what's the carbon footprint and also the sustainability goals that we're putting right now, both on creating a net zero supply chain and also how then we create and continuously creating impact to assure. But I think one thing that is more important, if we want to reinvent a new future where the smallholder farmers can actually be helped on that. But the future is when the consumption and the production of food has changed. It needs to assure that the sustainability of both environment will also tie to the sustainability of the business itself. Then how then you can create on two things in my view. First, how to embed the sustainability and the impact as part of your product and solution. So once you scale, the beauty of the agri and working with the small scale farmers, because you embed your impact with your product. Once you scale, then you're impacting social and a lot of part of it. You're impacting people. Because if we talk about other extractive sectors, once they grow, then they're creating more damage to the environment rather than the benefit. But working with the agriculture, at least the social part of it will always be there because we're working with most of the 90% of the farmers in Asia as small-scale farmers. So I think that's one. But the thing that usually missing is on the environmental side. But then you have to educate the stakeholders in your supply chain to ensure that they shift to more sustainable part of it, because talking about sustainability, it requires a bit more capital processes, infrastructure to ensure that they do things in a better way. So you have to create an incentives and access to the capital for them to do in the better practice, and then they can get some sort of like a premium of the incentives on doing that. But I think one thing that also has been missing is on the G part of the ESG, right? The governance part of it. And that's also what we also want to focusing to ensure that it provides an assurance and confidence, especially for the investors, for the startup in agri sector.
I think it's great at this forum where we think about revenue, we think about profitability, we think about multiples and valuation, but we're also thinking about social impact, helping local economy, distributing nutrition, but also sustainability impact, right? So I think this really is music to my ears. I'm going to return back to the audience to see, oh, okay, now 3 questions. Okay, you guys had your chance, huh? Now I only have 5 minutes left. Well, 4 questions. Because it's only 5 minutes, can I take all the questions and then you can answer them together? So maybe I can pass the mic together. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There are lights in my eyes, so I can see 4. But maybe we can pass mics first. And then there's one here as, yeah.
Hi, Zia Zaman. I'm a corporate development at Microsoft. Question is about how you might use AI to improve yields.
AI, right after Ellie. 1, 2, 3.
Hi, my name's Abian. I'm a student in ITB. So maybe on behalf of a lot of kids my age, we're still kind of confused what we're going to do after. So maybe you could share a bit of your personal experience, why you chose to continue with e-fishery.
And if you can pass the mic in front and then we move it back.
Hi, good morning. I'm Kwan Ming. I'm from Malaysia, e-commerce enabler, also a Lazada Sale Ambassador. So earlier you mentioned that you expand into India. I want to know what are your criteria in choosing which market to expand next, and if Southeast Asia, I mean within the ASEAN 10 countries right here, would be one of your next destination other than like going a little bit far away.
Okay, last question. And I'm picking up AI inspiration for school-going aspirants. Expansion plan, last theme that we have.
Hi, I'm Zong from Anfarm. We're based in Vietnam. So if we feed the fish, we feed the plants, so we optimize fertilizer. But we started 10 years after e-fishery, so if you offer us a very good playbook. So my question is, what is the moment that you find that you found the model to acquire customer at the larger scale?
Customer acquisition,
Yeah.
right?
Thank you.
Okay. Over to you.
Yeah. First on the AI side, the good thing is that we actually have a partnership with Microsoft about the AI. So I think you asked the questions because I want
Planted,
to
right?
share it to the audience. This is quite a smart way to do it. We use the AI right now. We're leveraging the ChatGPT to create what we call the product itself, named Mas Ahya, Ahli Budidaya. So the literal translation of the farming expert. So we use the ChatGPT, train them on all of the data that we have relating to the farming, the pond data and everything. But most importantly, they already have been educated on the local language. So people can ask anything about the farming, including what problems related to the disease, in their local Javanese language or local Sundanese language. It will create a massive access for farmers that already...
Next billion users.
Exactly, the next billion users, right? So we love it. A part of that, what we're also using internally related to the Copilot and everything, that we also love the fact that it improve the productivity of our engineering team. So I think that's the first part. And the second part related to the inspiration of when I was a student. I think I don't know whether you know, but before I started fishery, I actually was a fish farmer myself. And I started my own fish farming business back there when I was in college. And the inspiration of that fish farming business comes to the fact that I attended a class called aquaculture, right? And the reason why I was in that class is because it was guaranteed to get an A, and then I was there. So I want to clean up my GPA and then get a GPA improvement. That's the only reason why I was interested in aquaculture. But the professor told me that the future of food is in aquaculture for a good reason, because right now we eat more fish from the wild capture. And then he said that the fish is the last animal that we're hunting. But fish, 50% of it is still farmed. So if we talk about the upside, there's no reason why we're hunting more fish from the ocean. The humanity will move from the hunter to farmer, right? So simply by focusing on that, then you see the upside on it. And not to mention that most of the earth are water. So if we can figure out how then we cultivate the food from our water, it will help us sustainably over the next 50 to 100 years. So that's simply what my inspiration to assure that in the other terms is that you can buy a future in the present price, in the current price. And that's what what excites you about the future, whatever it is, an AI, what excites you about the future, that it can be growing in the future, you have to start it now. So that's the key of the inspiration. That's the second part. The third part is related to the regional expansion. For me, I think regional expansions is less about the proximity of the geographical, because definitely it helps for you to create an easy operations. But I think most importantly, to assure whether the underlying thesis of your business can actually be implemented. In this case, the underlying thesis of eFishery is that we help through technology for fragmented, distributed, small-scale farmers. We tried to do a pilot in Thailand and Vietnam, so it's closer than here. But in Thailand and Vietnam, it's a bit more consolidated, the players. There are already 3-4 big players that owning the farmers. So when we talk about the fishery, that we need that fragmentation. So that's the reason why we're India, because the farmers are even smaller. It's definitely much more fragmented, but it's centralized in one area. So we love that how then the underlying thesis of the business can assure that we can have a long-lasting impact down the road. And I think what was the last part again?
Customer acquisition.
Customer acquisition. So my epiphany, and then I have been doing it at scale over the past 10 years. I did the sales myself for the first 10 customers. I did it myself. So I went to farmers door by door, farm by time. They always said no, but I went there anyway. The next day, have a coffee with them in their house, and then went there the next day. And then we finally had the first 10 customers. And then when I asked why do you decide to use our product, I thought that it's about the innovation, the technology. No, 10 out of 10 farmers said that I pity you, I pity Gibran, because Gibran keeps coming. I want to help you because you're very persistent. So I think that's what usually missing when we talk about as a founders, right? We talk about people, customers, we reduce them in the numbers. Okay, how then, what's the CAC and what's the numbers, how we spend it. Suddenly our pitch is also focusing on numbers. We can improve your profit by 30%. But for the most part, we as a consumers, we don't really make decision based on numbers, right? We're not buying iPhone because this is value, blah, blah, blah. We don't really run a spreadsheet to compare, but it's about the emotional part of it. And for me, the relationship that the farmers with me is more important. So that's the reason why how we do customer acquisition at scale, simply figuring out who's the trusted person of the farmers that has the most touch point. In our case, it's a feed salesperson. So the first batch of the sales that we hired is the salesperson that's used to sell the feed or input to the farmers. And the pitch is not about, hey, we created an IoT solution helping you grow this and that. No. The pitch, and this is the most successful pitch of all time in our case, is that, hi, boss, I'm in a new company right now. Can you help me reach my target, lah, please? We've been knowing each other for a while, please. Because they pity me, right? They have to pity the salesperson as well. And the pity-based sales pitch is the most effective, especially on the farmer in the rural area. But suddenly, once they use it, then you show the numbers and you show the result. You can see the farms that are not using it. So the customer relations and really footprint on the market is what you have to replicate. We did it at scale in a form of a fishery point. So it's a small branches that we literally had like a farmers gathering every Friday. Simply gathering the farmers, have some coffees, and then we invite farmers to tell their story. And the story exactly different what we would tell them, because we might focus on the numbers, but they tell them, hey, because eFishery, we started eFishery using eFishery 12 months ago. Right now I can buy Avanza. Oh, you can buy Avanza? Okay lah. Wait, I can go to Umroh. I can get to Umroh. This is something that is not in our, we can't really comprehend as a founders, right? You have to emulate and understand what's your customers and what's their touch point.
Sales 101, ladies and gentlemen. Gibran, eFishery.